Okay, so we have an emergency, folks. So much so that I felt that it was necessary to revisit an old segment that I haven't touched since the early days of this channel. If you've been around long enough, you remember something called The Edit. And that was a segment where I talked about various issues that I was bothered by, things I was excited about, and the like. And it isn't that I hadn't had those things come up in the intervening years. It's just that recently I had a couple things come up that I wanted to talk about. Namely, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. And I have some thoughts. So with that, I wanted to talk about some things, well, one issue in particular about this forthcoming Mission Impossible outing that I'd like to discuss on this edition of The Edit. If you've been living under a rock and you don't know, the new trailer for Mission Impossible Final Reckoning dropped this week, and I have some things to say. Now, immediately, it's exciting. If you're a Mission Impossible fan, well, particularly if you're a fan of the Mission Impossible movies, it's exciting. Right off the top. If you've seen Dead Reckoning, just by the nature of that film's existence, you are looking forward to the Final Reckoning. I'm not. And here's why. The character of Luther, played by Ving Rhames. Now, look, I know what you're thinking. Well, I think I know what you're thinking. And that is, who cares about Luther? No, you may not be thinking that, but I care about Luther. And that's the reason I wanted to make this video. And I'll explain what's going on. So if you've seen the trailer, you're excited and you're ready to go. I saw the trailer and was not excited and ready to go. And the reason is because I have a theory. And this is just my made up theory. I didn't read anything. I didn't research anything. This is just based on my feeling about the direction that the series has gone, the Mission Impossible series has gone in, and where the Final Reckoning will end up. So, and the theory is that Luther will meet his end before all is said and done. I'm going to let that sink in for a second. Now, this is a problem for me. And it's not for the reasons you think. So many things to get into. One of the reasons why I think that that's whack is the way it feels like it's foreshadowed in Dead Reckoning. There's a sequence near the end of the film where before Ethan breaks away from the team to go to the final leg of the mission where the train sequence takes place and all of that, Luther has a line somewhere in there that talks about how Ethan should not put any one of their lives over the mission. The fact that Luther said that, spoke this line, to me suggests that that's foreshadowing that he's going to bite it at the end of, at some point in Final Reckoning. Now, I don't have a problem with killing off characters. If you've watched these videos that I made recently, you know that I like stories that take risks. And especially with characters that feel like they're, the legacy characters, which Luther is, since he's the only other character that besides Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt who's been around since the first movie. You can make a case for Kittredge, but Kittredge is, I'm not talking about Kittredge, I'm talking about the team. It's a risk to kill off a character like Luther. I don't have a problem with that. The problem is the way it feels like it was telegraphed. I don't feel like it was built up. And one of the reasons I say this is because in the trailer, there's a sequence in the trailer where Luther is not depicted when you see the team as a whole. and you see the black guy that was with Shea Wiggum's character in Dead Reckoning Part 1. It suggests that that's foreshadowed that he's going to switch sides. He's going to leave the side of the opposing forces who are trying to stop Ethan and join or assist in some way the IMF or or Ethan's team because they're rogue or whatever it is. So that was foreshadowed, and because that was foreshadowed and Luther's death was foreshadowed, there's a sequence in the trailer. Actually, a lot of Bing Rames's voiceover is highly suggestive that Luther is going to meet his demise. And again, it's not a problem that you kill Luther. It's a problem with how even this trailer is telegraphing that. You're telling us that I'd be really surprised if Luther doesn't die. Because this is supposed to be the last movie, someone's going to die. And the Mission Impossible team, at least between Dead Reckoning and now, Chris McQuarrie has gone on record to talk about, and Tom Cruise has mentioned something similar around raising the emotional stakes of these movies, particularly with Dead Reckoning and now Final Reckoning, which is why you see what happens to Ilsa's character, Rebecca Ferguson's character. And I'm not alone when I say how disappointed I was. Not that Ilsa had to not that Ilsa's character ended up where she ended up. It was how it was telegraphed. The trailers showed her, but she was in there very sparsely. And there was a sequence when they showed the team and she was not a part of that team. So she was very sparsely shown in the marketing materials and stuff. And I think the same is true for what's happening with Luther in this particular trailer. But because you don't see him a lot, his voiceover tells you a lot of other things. To me, anyway. If you haven't seen the trailer, I suggest, and you're curious, watch the trailer to see what I'm talking about. If you watch that trailer, you don't have an inkling that Luther's going to bite it, then okay, that's great. I, however, think otherwise. I think that Luther's going to get it, and I'm not a fan of that. And here's the thing: I was talking about emotional stakes. Raising emotional stakes, to me, is necessary. I think in a story, especially a story like this, where it's been built up, and every successive story has become bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can't get through certain instances like this without people dying, and without characters doing what they're doing, and without somebody dying. So, okay, cool. But the issue is this. I have to look at Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning. What helps me is looking at these two films separately. They're like a separate duology that happens to loosely tie into the first 6 movies. To me, Fallout is the pinnacle of this film series, and you can't tell me otherwise. I think that, frankly, the series should have ended at 6. Once Fallout was so well put together, so well done, and on every level, I don't know how you top it. So there's that. The first 6, and then now there's these last 2. And I look at them separately because of the way the construction of Dead Reckoning suggests that Final Reckoning will be structured similarly in terms of the writing and in terms of how plotting the plot. It's an entertaining movie, but I feel like from a narrative perspective, it has good ideas. But from a narrative perspective, it doesn't do what Fallout did. Fallout feels so narratively rich that not only do you, and it does such a great job with tying up loose ends and all these threads from other films leading up to that. I don't know how you top it. I don't think Dead Reckoning topped Fallout. I think Fallout is again still the best, but it's not a terrible movie. But it's just it has bigger problems than I think Fallout does. And I think that, which leads me to this discussion on Final Reckoning and how characters are handled. Because there's something about character deaths that feel like, because there's killing off characters to shake things up, which is fine. And it's killing characters off in a way that has emotional resonance. That's better. Because emotional resonance also shakes things up when you kill people off that mean something. Because if anything, Ethan should have died many times. But I don't think this series has the guts to kill off Ethan. And that would be really shocking. So you kill off other people around him. If you've seen Dead Reckoning, you know what happened with that. And Luther is the next closest person to Ethan, aside from anyone else he may have had a romantic interest in. So you kill him off. And because he's been around since the first movie, that means something. That has resonance. But I think if you want to do real damage, you kill off someone like Benji. Because Benji, Simon Pegg's character, and here's my reasoning for that. And it's not because he's white. It's not because Luther's black. And it has nothing to do with that. Oh, that's part of it. But let me tell you, why. Benji was what you thought was going to be a throwaway character in Mission Impossible 3. He was not a field agent. He was the dude that was doing all the tech stuff, which is Luther's deal. But because Luther was going to be in the field, there was going to be a different situation. So, and I think you had some good comic relief between the two characters and their what becomes their competition as the tech heads of the teams. So that's cool. But I think now Benji's become a fan favorite. So I think if you kill off a fan favorite, that's real damage. Luther it's more of like he's a fixture. So he's been around. And so I feel like killing him off when he's been sort of sidelined the last few movies. He's been in them, but he hasn't been as much as integral to the action as Benji has become. I think when you have someone like Benji and the way Benji stepped up, I think killing Benji off is more powerful than killing off Luther. Luther means something just because he's been around since the first movie. But I think, because he's been sidelined, that almost just is like you have to kill somebody off, so you just pick Luther because he's been around the longest. And I think it's misguided thinking that his death will mean more just because he's been around the longest. I think Benji's death means more because he started off as some kind of like just a random tech dude and became a favorite quickly, like within less movies. But they're not going to kill Benji off either because you need the comic relief. And Benji of the group, he's the funniest, quote, funniest person in the proceedings. So you need somebody like him to balance out the weight. So say, for instance, Luther dies and it's really emotional. It's really sad. At some point, you're going to need some levity and you need Benji for that. So, but then you replace Luther. Here's where the race thing comes in. You replace Luther with another black dude who was on the other, who was on the opposing team. And that feels weird because you need a black guy because the team always has had one black person. You can go back to the show and it's always, but there have been exceptions where you've had a couple black people doing stuff. So, but at least there's been episodes where you've seen more than one black person doing something. Why couldn't there be more than one black person doing something? That's just an honest question. And I think by the same token, you go back to Dead Reckoning and Ilsa and Haley Atwell's character. Why couldn't there be two women on the team? The show has showed, the original television series had several episodes where more than one woman was doing stuff on the team. What's the problem with that? Why couldn't there be more than one woman doing stuff on the team in the movies? Because there can only be one woman that Ethan has eyes for. I'm not understanding why why the filmmakers aren't thinking about how odd that feels. It feels odd. Certainly now that you have to be, pandering to any sort of messaging or agenda, but I feel like it feels more weird to have only one woman in a group now than it might have felt in the 1960s and 70s. Speaking of, so I've been watching a lot of the show. I'd been a fan of the show since I was very young, and in fact, that's what turned me on to the movies. I'd been watching the show as a kid in the early 90s, and so by the mid 90s, when the first Mission Impossible came out, I was ready to see it because I was a fan of the show, and I'd played the video games, and I was all in it. And the show is actually it's amazing how even in the very first season, how well realized the concept of the show was. They didn't really change anything. It was the same throughout all the seasons, and it's provided sound foundation for Tom Cruise and his team to build the Mission Impossible film series on. And so, yeah, they would have been silly to change any of the fundamentals of that. It's a good show. If you haven't watched the show, like, give it a good watch. It's on Pluto TV for free, and you can watch as many. It's 24 hours a day. Turn it on and watch it. It's a good show. Especially those first 3 seasons are solid, man. Those first people are acting their behinds off in that show, and the quality is fairly consistent when you leave it. It changes because actors and things change and stuff like that, but for the most part, the concept is sound. So yeah. So in my frustration with the idea, and I realize I could be completely wrong about Luther, but I don't think I am. And in fact, if you go back and watch Dead Reckoning again, and just watch it, just to get a feel for what it feels like, and if you don't have a feeling that Luther is going to get it, then great. I feel like the movie pretty much tells you Luther's going to get it, and if you don't think that, watch the Final Reckoning trailer. That will tell you. I don't think it could be any clearer to me. I could be reading into it. I don't think I am, though. That's basically the crux of this particular rant. I'm not happy that that's the suggestion, that Luther is gonna bite it, and frankly, I don't know that I don't feel as excited to watch that movie. If I'm being honest, I probably will, but I can see myself not watching it when it comes out. It might be, I can see it being an issue because one of my best friends, it's part of it's a tradition to go see these movies, and am I going to want to disappoint him by not seeing the movie? I don't think I'm going to do that. So if it comes up, then I'll probably catch it with him. But I just know. I feel it in my gut what's going to happen to Luther. And I welcome any thoughts anybody has on what's going on. And I'm surprised, actually, frankly, that it's not actually it's being talked about online. There was like one place, I think Screen Rant had an article about their guess that Luther was going to bite it, but I saw it nowhere else. And I looked because that's what I felt. I said, who else is talking about this? No one in the comments of the Mission Impossible trailer video on YouTube is talking about it. Everyone's all right because they're distracted, right? They're distracted by Tom Cruise and his excellence and junk, which is fine. Oh, that's great. No one's complaining about Tom Cruise and his gangsterness. He's a G, right? He has nothing to prove. We all know that. The problem comes in when the story feels like it's not really, it's not that there's not care. This is the other thing. The filmmakers are taking great care to execute on something that is going to be sound. They're not going to put out a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. It's not going to be bad. There give me some things you don't like about it. There's some things you don't agree with. And that's fine. These are just some things that I'm talking about that I don't agree with. And I just have a really strong feeling. I know that piece is going to happen. Because really, at the end of the day, we know where Final Reckoning is going. They have to get the key and deal with the key so that the AI enemy situation doesn't jack up the world. We know the ultimate stuff. What the stuff that we don't know is more like plot stuff. What happens with the characters and what happens with how does it end after the final battle with Gabriel and all that. We don't know those things. But if you know anything about Mission Impossible at all, you have a good feeling about, like, I feel like Ethan won't go. Like, he's probably not going to die. Which is whatever. That's fine. But although, if anybody should die, Ethan should die, or Benji should die. Like, you need make this stuff mean something. Like, don't just kill people off, just to shake it up. Like, there has to be some real thought. And this is just me. This is my opinion. Think about it, because part of it is that, particularly with these last 4 movies or so. Fallout is an exception though, but I will say that the recent Mission Impossible movies feel like they're simply vehicles for the next ridiculous stunt. From 3 up to 6, Mission Impossible 3 to 6, you at least had engaging stories that to build around the stunts. And it isn't that Dead Reckoning is not an engaging story. It's that when you compare it to the previous movies, it feels less engaging than Fallout. Again, Fallout had threads from Mission Impossible 3, 4, and 5 all up in there. And this movie Dead Reckoning tries to sort of loop things in from earlier movies, particularly from before the first movie, and in the first movie because you have Kittredge and stuff in it. But I don't know how it works. I don't think it works as well because it's not terrible. I just feel like it feels a little bit flat. And similarly with the character placements, I'll say, for those in case people haven't seen the movie, where characters are placed by the end of a story has to have some kind of meaning. And I think now, because it seems like it's coming to a close, somebody has to go. So it feels like they don't have to go. They don't have to go. But if you're going to kill somebody off, make it mean something, and do it in a way that feels like there's some real, like, or there's some other deeper level of thought. Luther's death is meaningful only because he's been around so long, but it feels like it has less impact than someone else. That's why what happened to Ilsa was so impactful. She was a later addition to the series, but when she was where she ends up is so disappointing because she became a favorite so late in the game, but she meant something. And the other problem with that was that it was telegraphed. They called it out. It wasn't like it was subtly foreshadowed. It was like they blatantly pit her against this other woman. It's like Ethan has to choose between who's going to live and who's going to die. Like, you can't save them both, and they're not both going to be around. So, and you hope he can save both, but if you've seen the movie, you know what happens. And that's frustrating too. So all I'm saying is I'm not looking forward to Final Reckoning. You might be, and that's great. I'll probably still watch it. Look, because I've watched these movies. I grew up with these movies, and I love the movies. But I also love the show. And so I say that because, like, in my frustration, I'm just going to go back to the show. Because the show is the show, and it's like it's a comfort show. And so I know they're not going to mess up. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on this edition of The Edit. Thank you for listening to this rant. I may be back with some other things to talk about on this particular segment fairly soon. But for now, that's going to be it. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.